Good morning, everyone, and happy Saturday. We're taking a live look outside this morning. It is gloomy, it is rainy, it is snowy, it is all the things to start off your weekend.
The weather is weathering.
Yes, it very much so is.
And there is nobody better to tell us that the weather is weathering than Chris Bianchi joining us this morning. And Chris, let's talk about why this has been such a difficult storm to predict.
There's so many different factors at play, but I appreciate that. I'll start by saying there's really kind of a couple of factors at play. One, the amount of precipitation, the amount of water with this storm. Now, we're tapping the moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico, right? You ever been in the Gulf of Mexico? A lot of water there, also very warm. Warmer air can hold more moisture. So we just have a ton of liquid. Now, if that all falls as snow, this would be a foot plus worth of snow. No question for us in the Denver area. But the fact is, you look outside right now, in most of Denver, it is raining right now. So when we flip over from rain to snow, that's going to entirely determine how much snow we get and when. So that's why it's such a tricky forecast. That exact transition point means whether you're getting a little bit of slush versus, oh my goodness, I got 10 inches of snow. So let's take a look at those winter weather alerts across the state. And by the way, I do have a few extra gray hairs. I'm going to tell myself that's because of this storm, but well, I'm 36. But winter weather alerts, we have winter storm warnings in place for us in the high country, 10 to 20 inches possible for us in the West Elk Mountains and higher amounts for the Palmer Divide, no doubt about that. AC Doppler radar is filling in on this Saturday morning. We're getting that deep Gulf moisture. Notice those yellows, those reds. We even had some lightning strikes out by Lamar this morning, just giving us an indication of just the enormous amount of water that we're talking about. And this is a storm for February the 3rd here, folks. And we're talking about rain in Denver. That is thanks to all that Gulf moisture and that warm Gulf tropical air that's streaming on in, but it's also meaning a wet start to our Saturday. Now we'll transition from rain to snow, as I mentioned, somewhere between about 9 a.m. to midday or so. So about 9 to 12, that's when we transition from rain to snow. By the way, it's already snowing at the airport and in Lone Tree, as well as Conifer Bailey, where it's been snowing overnight. Then it shuts down between about 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. this evening. That's probably when we end things. If it lasts a little longer, we could end up on the high end of some of these totals, but this is the best way to visualize it, in my opinion. 3 to 6 inches worth of snowfall seems to be the most likely north and east sides of town, lower south and west sides of town on the higher end. And here's, again, from a broad perspective, Palmer Divide, foothills above 6,000 feet. That's where somebody, I'm just telling you, somebody's going to come in with a foot of snow, and it's probably going to be in the foothills west of Denver or on the Palmer Divide south of Denver. Exactly depends on just a few things, but we'll get into more detail about this, and also I'll show you the kind of catalyst behind all this wet weather on this Saturday morning. All that coming up with my full forecast.
All right, thanks so much for that, Chris. New this morning, CDOT crews are working so hard in both the I-70 mountain corridor and the metro area. You can see why. Getting ready for the snow that's now showing up. It's going to be continuing through a lot of today. This morning, they're warning drivers, take it easy on the road. Give yourself lots of time, especially if you are headed up to the mountains.
I do urge motorists to be prepared when they're headed out today, because the snow is going to pick up. It already is picking up along the I-70 mountain corridor between C-470 and Denver, and it is heavy on the west side of the tunnel with very little lane recognition. While our crews are out in force, the snow is just coming down enough in which it can make for very challenging driving conditions.
They also said having an emergency supply kit on hand is a great idea in case we do see some road closures later in the day. So towns like Silverthorne up in the high country are also preparing for those road closures this weekend, especially after the fallout they've seen.
Yeah, road closures on I-70 usually send drivers through smaller towns like Silverthorne. And the town is trying to figure out how to handle all that traffic when those closures do happen. You might remember MLK weekend when people got stuck everywhere trying to get back from their destinations, especially when Berthoud Pass closed. A 10-minute drive through Silverthorne took 3 hours, raising concerns over how emergency responders could even get to an emergency if there was one. Now, Silverthorne leaders are trying to come up with a different solution.
Emergency situations, speed is critical. And so how do we keep our roads open enough that they can have that speed to get to those incidents? And it may take some kind of metering like you would see on I-70 or on an on-ramp where people coming into the community are metered so that we can stay safe.
It's the town manager from Silverthorne there. Next week, leaders will meet with CDOT to go over what options they might have.
Protests are planned for later today against Denver Mayor Mike Johnston's first veto. City Council passed on an ordinance banning closing homeless encampments when it's below freezing. Then the mayor decided to veto that and reverse that decision. In a letter to City Council, Johnston says this bill would restrict the city's ability to get people experiencing homelessness into shelter for 4 months of the year. He's been working since he was elected to get thousands of people living on the streets into shelters. The mayor's office said encampments will not be cleared out without temporary housing available, except in the case of threats to public health and safety. Advocates for people experiencing homelessness say that they're discouraged by this decision.
When you take these encampments away, you take their community away from them, which gives people no one to check on each other when it is negative cold out. In the long run, this does no good for no one in the city of Denver at all. At all.
Today, advocate group House Keys Action Network Denver is planning to protest outside of City Hall to call for an end to homeless sweeps in freezing temperatures.
Meanwhile, officials in Denver are preparing to move hundreds of migrants and families out of city shelters that many have been staying in for months. That move out will start on Monday. Advocates say this will impact about 743 families through the end of March. On Monday, about 150 families will be discharged from shelters after the city's new policies kick in, which limit the amount of time that families can spend in shelters. Denver officials say they won't allow people to camp on streets either. At this point, advocates say they don't have enough housing for everyone who will be discharged.
Denver Public Schools is missing out on about $17.5 million as they are now averaging about 200 new to the country students every week. More than 3,000 new migrant students have joined the district, but a lot of the students weren't there for the annual pupil count when the state was giving out money based on enrollment. Those added students mean the district needs to come up with $17 million to cover that cost. Sounds like a lot, but it actually is only about 1% of the district's budget. The district says it hasn't had to pull from reserves yet. But inside the classroom, teachers are saying that they're really worried about the impact if these numbers continue.
Oh, we're extremely concerned. We've seen class sizes across the district go up. You go and talk to the educators; they love supporting the students, but at the end of the day, they're exhausted, and it's really just a challenge for everybody.
DPS says it doesn't know how many of those 3,000 students will stay, and they may not know that until next year's count day. But if the surge continues, teachers say the district needs to figure out a way to make class sizes more manageable. Also want to let you know that today, 9 News will be airing our documentary, Una Vida Nueva. It tells the story of several migrants who have come to Colorado to build a home and the struggles they've been encountering. That's going to be airing at 5:30 tonight after 9 News at 5.
This morning, parents in Denver Public Schools have a new tool to help them pick the right school for their kids. It's called the Mile High School Guide. A group called Root Ed launched the data dashboard this week during DPS's school choice window. Lets families search information about Denver's schools, things like student to teacher ratios, standardized test scores, and student attendance rates.
I think, having a tool that allows you to compare schools, so you can say, okay, these are the 3 elementary schools that are in my neighborhood or in my general region of the city, and then being able to line those up side by side to say, okay, well, these are the hours of operation. How does that fit with my schedule for pickup and drop off? These are what they offer in terms of programs, in terms of what your student might need.
So this isn't really a new idea. A committee in the district recommended a dashboard like this several years ago. Now, this dashboard's launch comes at the same time as DPS school choice, when families can apply to send their kids to whichever school they want in the district next year. The window is open now. Families have until February 12th to submit their applications.
This week, a mom from Colorado joined other parents in the nation's capital to face the CEOs of social media sites, pushing them to make changes that they hope will save lives. Lori Schott lost her daughter, Anna Lee, to suicide, but it was only after her death that her family discovered the troubling content she was seeing on social media. So Lori took her daughter's story and her picture from her home in northeastern Colorado and went to Washington, D.C. She joined other parents and lawmakers at a Senate hearing, demanding that social media CEOs do more to protect children on their platforms.
And he had to look at us and look at those children, and I don't see how anybody could not take a stance with us to stop this from happening.
Social media executives told lawmakers they are working together to use AI now to try and better identify harmful content. Parents like Lori are pushing lawmakers to pass several new bills like the bipartisan Kids Online Safety Act, which would add strict default privacy controls for minors and an opt-out of the algorithm recommendations.
The federal election interference case against former President Donald Trump is officially on hold right now. Proceedings were supposed to start early next month. Now a judge is saying that is no longer the case. The decision comes as the D.C. Circuit Court hasn't yet decided on whether former President Trump is immune from prosecution. This means the trial might not conclude until after the Republican National Convention. The former president has pleaded not guilty.
Georgia District Attorney Fani Willis has now acknowledged having a personal relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade in the state's case against former President Donald Trump. Willis responded to that allegation in a 176-page filing. Trump and another co-defendant are looking to get both of them disqualified from the Georgia election interference case. In the filings, Willis and her office are arguing that the relationship has not corrupted their ability to oversee the case. Last week, the Republican-led Georgia Senate approved a resolution to establish a committee to investigate Willis.